My name is Robin. I'm the lead generalist artist at Irongate, but as I do so much different things on Valheim and within the company, it's just easier for me to say that I do the coffee. I do coffee. Before we get into my Side of Mistlands, I just wanted to take some time and to explain who I am, so you'll better understand the rest of my talk. I've always been interested in games since I was 6 years old. I got my first Nintendo. My father bought it, and I played Super Mario, Duck Hunt, Castlevania, Mega Man. Mega Man and Castlevania are two of my absolute favorite games. Still to this day, the old ones. I decided to become a character artist after playing Final Fantasy VII. This was probably year 1999. I lived in Japan and learned Japanese for 2 years, so I could get into animation school, but I gave up on that and returned back to Sweden. Ultimately, I threw all of my old skills away at the age of 28 and starting doing concept art and illustrations. I knew a little bit of how to draw and paint before, but from there on out, when I was 28, this was illustrations and concept art was such a new thing for me, and it was very, very inspiring to see other people on YouTube doing stuff like this, using a Wacom tablet. I usually spent about 2-3 hours each evening doing concepts and illustrations, and after a while this led me to start learning 3D modeling and sculpting. I was doing stuff that I saw on YouTube that inspired me, and after a while, when these 3D models and these concept arts weren't doing that much for me anymore, I thought, okay, so how do I actually start rigging these and animating them? And after after that, when I noticed that, okay, so I can animate these things and it looks cool, but there's no end product here. So I got into Unreal Engine 4 and started implementing animations and characters and stuff like that, and that's how I got into making my personal projects. So with that said, I was able to turn my passion and love for a hobby into my current profession. It took a lot of hard work, and sometimes I never even thought I would make it. I was doing some freelance work, but I never really enjoyed doing freelance work. But being consistent every evening, having a strict routine, eventually paid off, at least for me. I started working at Irongate 2019 as their first employee under Richard and Henrik. And I remember doing the art test for getting in. It was basically make a creature and one 3D asset. And I really wanted to try hard and overdo it, so I made 2 creatures and I animated them, and I did one 3D asset and made a nice presentation of like 2 lore pages for the creatures, just to be able to show them that I could do a lot more things than just 3D. And since then I've been told that I wasn't the first choice. I was actually the 3rd pick, but the other 2 actually declined the offer, so that was a huge win for me. So now that I was working at Irongate, this is where I learned 3 very important guidelines that I try to stick to in every design choice I do. Richard, my captain, is a veteran in the industry, and he asked me one thing and told me 2 things. What is the feeling that we want to achieve? And it sounds a bit cheesy maybe, but this is something we ask ourselves and each other on a daily basis at Irongate. What is the feeling? And then he said, make it simple. Nobody loves complicated things. We do love depth, but we do not like complicity. Make it simple. And then he said, good enough is the finish line. Don't overdo something. A polished potato is still a potato. And with these guiding stars, we created all you know. Everything you love and hate in Valheim come from these basic principles. Keeping it simple, what is the feeling, and just make it good enough. Don't make something overcomplicated, and nothing will ever be perfect. So when Richard showed me the first Mistlands, there was these big trees, giant Jotun skulls, cobweb and spider silk, a very murky place. It almost felt like swamps and black forest melded together. I was very much looking forward to getting into working on it. And this was back in 2019 when I saw it first time. Well, we had the mountains and the heathlands, which turned into plains. We had to get those things done first. And eventually we did. EA dropped. 4 months of bug fixing. Hearth and Home dropped. Irongate got bigger. Abomination and Root armor dropped. And then the Frost Caves and new armor. But this was things that were added in previous biomes, so you weren't really progressing forward in any way. Like Mistlands was still hanging in front of us. It was something we would eventually have to deal with and go back to and revisit. And I remember when Richard was saying, like, it's finally time. It's time. We're going back to Mistlands. We're going to make Mistlands. And I think some people in the company were thinking, like, okay, so we're going back to this murky Mistlands. But I remember Richard also saying, this could be the last chance we get to make something really different. Ashlands and Deep North are pretty straightforward in what to expect. A hot biome and a cold biome. But what would Mistlands be able to hide? What could there actually be inside Mistlands? People have an expectation of spiders, big giant skulls, but what was the feeling we really wanted to achieve in there? So we sat down and tried to figure out what we wanted. A lot of the inspiration came from Iceland, volcanic black rocks and green ancient grass, something that makes, like, the color of the grass against the black rock really makes it pop, the green, which makes it feel very, very old and magical somehow. Could we somehow hide beauty in the mist? After a lot of testing with rocks and grass and ground textures and some expert lighting choices from Richard, we had a very rough but cool looking environment. This was going to be the new Mistlands. And this is something I will go into in more depth in the next part of my Side of Mistlands.